Welcome back to the Metabolic Wisdom Podcast. If you're new here, my name is Sara Childers, and this is our 4th episode, and we are talking about all things spirit, but not in the way that you think. So the last few episodes, I have been talking about the foundations of a fully feminine woman, a fully embodied woman, and we went through body, then mind, now we're on spirit, and as I said, it's going to be a little bit different than you might think. And I think that those who get it will get it, and those who don't won't. This is not a conversation for everyone, but if you're somebody who loves Jesus, wants to follow the Lord, take care of your health, but also be kind of woo-woo and intuitive with things as well, I think that this will be a great conversation for you. And with that being said, let's get into it. So I think starting out, I kind of want to talk about my background. So I'm a Christian, of course. I've been a Christian since I was probably 13 or 14, and my faith has always been really important to me, even though, we all make mistakes. We all get a little off track here and there. But all in all, this is something that I've been very serious about for my entire life, pretty much, my entire adult life. And when it comes to our faith, kind of like our health, I think that a lot of times when we're dealing with it long term, it can feel like one step forward, 2 steps back. And I don't think a lot of women even think about this or realize this, but your faith and your spirit and what you let into your mind and what you let affect your spirit, I think has a huge influence on your health. And that is something that I want to talk about today. And if you are on YouTube watching this, you can see this huge notebook full of notes that I have. I actually kind of did a rough draft of this podcast script, like this episode script, a few weeks ago when I was traveling. But what's interesting about it is that I have had a few things come to my attention lately that have to do with this episode that I feel like are really timely. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit as we go on, but I think it's interesting. I want to set the groundwork first, though. When we're thinking about a woman and a woman's spirit and how that relates to our health, but also to the Bible and also to who we are as women, I read a book one time, and it was super transformational. And it was all about the spirit of a woman, and it's actually called Cultivating by John Eldredge. They actually have a men's version of this called Wild at Heart. My husband read it, and that's an entire story in and of itself, and it was just absolutely transformational. But it talks about the spirit of a woman being calm, intentional, more of a helper, intuitive, and I think when we are at our healthiest state as women, we are a bit more in touch with ourselves, in touch with our spirit, so to speak, and we're more intuitive and just honestly more present, I guess you could say. Now, I don't want to get into this episode and just be this woo-woo word salad, just throwing around things like spirit and touch of the spirit and spirit this and spirit that. Like, I've heard people say that, especially lately in the health and wellness field, and I'm just like, what the heck are you even saying? So bear with me here, but I'm going to try to be as eloquent as possible when I explain all this to you. When we think of womanhood, though, I want us to think about when we are our healthiest selves, we have enough mental bandwidth to be emotionally intelligent, wise, and intuitive, so we can go with our gut and not be super wrong. I think as women, that's truly who we are. And I think it's so interesting when we grow up in Christian culture, and it always talks about be a Proverbs 31 woman, be a Proverbs 31 woman. And people don't even realize that Proverbs 31 and a lot of the wisdom that is in Proverbs is actually not a woman. Like, it's not an actual woman. It's wisdom personified as a woman, because that's kind of our nature. Is, behind every successful man, you see really a woman that is wise and intuitive and is his helper and his supporter. And I think it's interesting when you look at the Bible accurately and you see that when it talks about wisdom in the Bible, it personifies it as a woman, and that's kind of the Proverbs 31 woman. And that's just because women are emotional, intuitive, helpers, caregivers. I would even dare to say like a spiritual compass, a spiritual North Star that kind of anchors the family, her husband, or anybody that she's around if you are in a really healthy state. So today I want to talk about what affects your spirit, what gets us off track with feeling in touch with our own inner wisdom, so to speak, and how to fix that. Because I think that is a huge missing piece in our little health puzzle. And before I go too far, I want you to think about this. If you are someone who is a little on the fence about this entire idea of wisdom or whatever, because maybe you feel numb to things, maybe you feel out of touch with your own body, maybe you feel out of touch with your own intuition, that is a sign that things are dysregulated. If you feel numb to emotion or things that happen to you, or if you are constantly feeling out of tune with your own body and just confused, then that is a sign that your spirit's a little haywire. Because as women, we really feel things in our own body. Men are more not emotional, logical. They think black and white, where we're more in the gray. And I can't tell you how many women who were intuitive who came to me and they were like, I feel like my kidneys are hurt, or I feel like this is off. I feel like this organ's not doing good. And that's actually the truth, because they're in touch with their own bodies and they're able to see clearly what they need. So this is kind of how that relates back to health. And it's really a shame that nobody talks about this, or people are just now starting to talk about this some more, because the difference between women and men, how we feel in our own bodies, the own unique wisdom we both carry, and, just having that mind, body, spirit connection, it's not really talked about because they're not emotional like that. They don't want to talk about things like that. And when we look at the scriptures, or even like most theological books, that were written hundreds of years before now, they were all written by men. They were all written by people who kind of see the world as black and white, logistical, not as spiritual and emotional, so to speak. So I think this is a new concept that people are starting to see, and it's very interesting. And if you want to see this play out in your own life, how important your spirit is, just look at your family and how they act when you're not happy, or your husband, how he is when you're not happy. Because happy wife, happy life. If mama ain't happy, nobody else is. And if you don't have kids, like I don't have kids, think about maybe a time in your life where you had your own mother, and the way she felt influenced the way you felt. Men get mad or sad and they just kind of turn it off or hide it or ignore it. Whereas women, since we're such emotional and spiritual beings, we express it and kind of push it on to other people, not even meaning to. And when men and women are in a healthy state, we're supposed to balance each other out. It's kind of like the yin and the yang to relationships. So we have that stage set. Now let's talk about what affects your spirit that you're not even realizing affects your spirit. Now, I mentioned earlier that I have been experiencing or reading some things that have been really timely for this episode. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about those two things. Actually, three, but we'll get into it. The first thing is Prayers of the Cosmos. So this is a book. It's very short, but it is the hardest read I've ever read in my entire life. Prayers of the Cosmos is actually an Aramaic translation of the Beatitudes in the Bible, a few snippets of different verses, but mostly breaking down the Lord's Prayer. Now, the reason that this is important is because Aramaic is the language in which Jesus actually spoke. He didn't speak Hebrew, he spoke Aramaic. And a lot of times when the Bible was being translated, it was being translated assuming he spoke Greek or something like that, when that's not necessarily the truth. And the thing about Aramaic language is that everything has multiple meanings. And it's very it's a very flavorful and emotional language. And as I was reading it, the conjugation, if you took Spanish in high school, there's different conjugations for different words. There's things that end in or a, and it has the feminine conjugation. And then things that end in o are masculine conjugation. And it's so interesting because when the Aramaic language has that same thing, and when you look at the way that the Aramaic language describes the Holy Spirit, it actually describes it in the female conjugation. And there's a lot of places that you could run with this too. There's a lot of assumptions you can make here. Some people make the assumption that the Trinity is actually a family, mother, son, father. I'm not trying to say anything like that, but I think it's interesting that if this is true, and if Jesus did speak Aramaic, and if he was speaking in the sense of the Holy Spirit being in the feminine conjugation, I just wonder if maybe that's an indicator of how much more connected we are to the Holy Spirit. Because when you read the Bible, Jesus did treat women differently than men. He treated them in a way that he knew them. Women desire to be known and understood, while men desire, I don't really know what men desire, I guess respect. I'm honestly not sure. I think I forgot. I knew at one point, but I forgot. Doesn't matter. This is a women's podcast. But women want to be understood and seen. And take the woman at the well, for instance. She had 5 husbands, and Jesus was like, I can tell you everything you've ever done. And he literally told her story, and that's how she knew he was God. And I think that's so interesting, because when we think about how intuitive we are as women, we go into a social situation and we read every social cue there is. 80% of communication is body language, and we read all 80% of that communication, and we're aware of multiple conversations going on in the room. We know what's happening. We can just see the look on somebody's face and kind of know. And I think God designed us that way, and I think there is a part of us that is a little bit more in tune with the Holy Spirit just because we're highly emotional. And I think that just is a testament to how important this stuff is, and how important it is that you pour into yourself the right things, so that the things of this world don't cloud your vision, but also don't clutter and cloud your mind and your vision so much that you end up in a state of chronic fight or flight, and your body ends up paying for it in the long run. Because I think that's really what's happened, is that we have jumbled ourselves up, and we have consumed so many things that stillness, that spiritual stillness, that calmness in our brain and in our mind that really makes us more intuitive as women gets lost. And so that's a little bit what I read. The first thing that I read that I thought was so timely is kind of digging deeper into the scriptures when it came to the actual original language and what that means. It's just interesting because in the Aramaic language, you have to look at everything in 3 different lenses, like literal, metaphorical, and metaphysical. And it's a lot, and it's deep, and it's weird, and it's like traveling into an unknown place that you're kind of uncomfortable traveling with, especially if you grew up Southern Baptist, but you want to go there because you want to know God more. It's just interesting. But I'll link that in the show notes or in my email newsletter that I send out every Friday with more information on the particular episode that came out this week, which is what you're watching now. But the next thing that I read, or that I've been reading, is a book all about social media consumption. So this is like where we get into the woo-woo. Hold your thought on me consuming this book, and let's reframe here. So this is where things get really interesting if they haven't already. We're going to back up a little bit, because you can't know what affects your spirit if you don't even know what that entails, or how to measure that, or what. And this is kind of where I say that I kind of talk about this in a different fashion than you think I would. If you followed me for the last year on YouTube, you would know that I posted a deep dive on vibrational frequencies, and I talked all about vibrational frequencies and what they are and how they affect our bodies. This is kind of where we have this spirit-body connection, I believe. And this is nothing new age. This is not like crystals, or saying that you're like you're a Cancer, or like a kryptonite, I don't know, like a Scorpio. It's none of that. This is actually an explanation of energy. It's part of what's called bioenergetics, which is the science of the energy of life. Vibrational frequencies are how frequently we pretty much how our energy is managed. But if you believe in the spiritual realm, if you believe in God and Jesus, but you also believe in science and believe that everything that your faith says has to line up and be true in the physical world, then you will have to agree with this, because this is actual science. So our vibrational frequency is the frequency in which our atoms vibrate, or atoms of anything vibrate. The atoms of this chair vibrate. So we are made up of cells. Yes, we are. But below cells, deeper than cells, on a physical level, so if you took physics, you learned about this, everything, matter, solid, liquid, gas, anything is made up of atoms. You split an atom, you make a bomb. Everything is made up of atoms. Well, atoms vibrate. And this is called a vibrational frequency. And it is measured in what's called hertz. So you can measure how fast atoms vibrate based off their hertz level. There are machines that measure this. It's very interesting. The higher the vibrational frequency, if you put it in a machine, there's a machine that has like sand, and it makes different patterns, and the higher the vibrational frequency, the more beautiful and intricate the patterns are. I think that's God working there. But us humans, we function better when we have a higher vibrational frequency. Our cells in our body function better when we have a higher vibrational frequency. And now, I'm not going to leave you with just saying keep the vibes high, but like our literal atoms work more efficiently when our vibrational frequency is high, and you'd be surprised at what lowers vibrational frequency. I'll give you a quick list. Of course, it'll be the things that you're not surprised about. Plastics, unhealthy food, heavy metals, infection, things like that can lower our vibrational frequency. But what actually affects our vibrational frequency just as much, if not more, are things like negative thoughts, negative words, negative speech, and basically speaking ill all the time. And actually things like prayer and speaking life. Does that sound familiar? From Psalms or Proverbs? Speaking life actually raises our vibrational frequency. Praying, singing, especially worship music, raises our vibrational frequency. And they say that there is a vibrational frequency that represents God. I don't know. I feel like that would be off the charts, but I think it's interesting. And there are a lot of things that can lower that vibrational frequency that we actually aren't super aware of. And the reason it lowers our vibrational frequency is because when we have a high vibrational frequency, we have high energy. Well, if we drain ourselves of our energy, that vibrational frequency slows down because we only have so much energy to give. Think about it this way. You only have so many energy cookies in your cookie jar. Some things that really drain our energy are things like overconsumption. I was listening to this fabulous podcast today, and it was talking about how always being a chronic consumer, which ironic, I was consuming a podcast, but being a chronic consumer actually drains your energy. Even if you're looking at great things, even if you're reading a self-help book, if you're looking at health articles, if you're reading, some information on the internet about the latest news, if you are just constantly consuming, even if it's a podcast, even if it's whatever, if you're not ever sitting in silence, if you're not ever slowing down, if you're always go, 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 I have to find the next answer, more information, learn, that actually can drain your energy and literally bring down your vibrational frequency. And when our vibrational frequency is low, our cells don't work as well. And when we're constantly consuming things like a podcast, music, then getting on social media, then watching a TV show, then watching a YouTube channel, then doing this, then doing that, then listening to something, watching the news, all of that, we are giving away our cookies out of our cookie jar. And not only does it take up and use a lot of energy in our bodies, even in the form of minerals. That's why I see so many women, 10 out of 10 women that come to me have low minerals because their energy is wiped out. But also, it jumbles our brain so much because when we're constantly synthesizing and breaking down information that we've consumed, we're spending this large amount of energy and then we're not getting any recoup from it. And our mind is just everywhere. And we end up physically being drained with no recovery, having a mind that's kind of addicted to that cortisol spike, to that dopamine hit. And so we want to just keep going, and we subconsciously think it'd be better if we just kept going instead of being uncomfortable in the silence and uncomfortable in our own solitude. And we end up going so far down the line that we end up feeling a little desensitized, a little numb to emotion, what's going on, or maybe just feeling really out of touch with our bodies, feeling like our mind is just so far away from where we are at physically. And the book I read that was so timely for this was Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. So I'm going through what I call a digital detox. Now, I did allow myself one podcast today, and that was it that I listened to, a 30-minute podcast. But it talks about going through a detox. Mostly my detox is over consuming YouTube and podcasts and social media, and being able to sit in the solitude and rest in that, just rest in solitude and quietness, I guess you could say, but also finding really life-giving things to do instead. Like, I started crafting last night with this polymer clay, so fun, and I think I can already tell it's only been a few days, like 5 days, but I can already tell that this is going to be completely transformational. And part of this journey was because I had gotten my hair test back. I do hair test in my practice. I do a lot of functional medicine testing in my practice. And I have done, quote unquote, all of the things in the last 6 months since I had my initial 2025 hair test. I did my 2025 hair test, of course, in January, excuse me. And I had that 6 months between January and June or early July to replenish myself of minerals and to rest more. And on paper I did that, but when I was resting, I was over consuming information. I'm a very perfectionistic, can't stop, always have to be doing something, even if it's a micro productivity habit or whatever. And on paper, I've done all the things. Well, I took a look at my minerals, and they were still strikingly low. Even though I gave myself a questionable amount of potassium, sodium, magnesium, levels I would never give another client. And there's 3 things I think are going on. I think I might have a parasite or a mold. Those are 2 questionable things. We're detoxing either way. But the third thing was the consumption. The third thing, when I did a lot of reflection on myself and my habits, I realized, oh wow, like I slowed down on paper. I took maybe a little bit less of a client load. I really honed in on my marketing, so I wasn't spending every day on social media too much. But I was still consuming a lot, reading tons, podcasting, tons of podcasts I listened to, tons of YouTube channels, all long form, non stimulating content, but still content, still energy being expelled. And you may not be dealing with this. You may not actually have a lot of energy being expelled from you when it comes to consumption of podcasts or YouTube channels or anything like that. But maybe there's something else taking your energy. Maybe you get in a conflict with family or at work or with friends or any situation, and you just think, I just don't have the energy for this. And that's a huge indicator that you're drained. But what can we do to quiet all of the cookie monsters that are trying to literally, figuratively steal our energy cookies from us? So the jar is empty. How do we make more cookies for this cookie jar, then keep it away from whatever cookie monsters want it? It's all metaphorical, of course. We start, for one, by realizing that we are not men. We, in no sense, shape, form, fashion, are men. We are almost the exact opposite of men. A lot of the things that men do in the health space that is good for them and gives them energy is not good for us. Intermittent fasting, cold plunge therapy. Even like when we're talking about the vibrational frequencies, a lot of people don't realize this, because who would? But there's actual studies that show that, scientific studies, this is not woo-woo, there's actual scientific studies that show that women are much more sensitive. Their vibrational frequency is much more sensitive to everything around them, because we're very intuitive, very horizontal, emotional people. And also, our vibrational frequency is supposed to be higher than men. So this is something that we actually need to pay a lot of attention to. We need to pay a lot of attention to the things we consume, the things around us, the things on us, the things in our environment, because we are more sensitive and we function better at a higher vibrational frequency than men. The best thing you could do as a woman for your health, for your energy, your energetic field, your vibrational frequency, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, is, for one, to stop playing whack-a-mole with your health. Your health, your body is not an arcade game. You can do all of the things you want to do, but you cannot outrun a bad state of consciousness. So you can supplement all you want. I think that I'm perfect example of, you can supplement all you want, but if you have a poor state of consciousness and you're always over consuming, you're not going to get anywhere with that. Your minerals will be depleted faster than you're consuming them. Also, I think that food and diet and exercise are so important, and they actually do help with our vibrational frequency. They bring up the vibrational frequency. But I think that if you're constantly in tug of war with the things that drain your energy versus the things that give you your energy, it's going to be so hard to actually move the needle and make progress. So you may need to list out what drains your energy and what gives you energy, and make sure that the list of things that give you energy in your life is longer, maybe even much longer than the things that drain your energy. And I mean, I've given examples, of course, of things that give you energy or could give you energy and things that could drain your energy, but I'm going to trust that you're going to be intuitive with this and that you are going to think about what lights you up inside and what literally physically makes you feel drained when you even think about it. The reality is that we were meant to be co-creators with Christ, and as daughters of Christ, we need to learn to steward things well. I was actually thinking today, while I was in some solitude, how our bodies, yes, are flawed, and one day we will have new bodies, but I wonder if even our heavenly bodies that will be so perfect will require some really good stewardship while we're in heaven. There's nothing in the Bible that says that when we get to heaven, we won't have to any longer steward things well. It just says that there will be no more tears, no more sadness or whatever, but it doesn't say anything about how we steward things. Of course, like our sinful nature will be gone and that will help a lot, but I think that it's important that we have some sort of like good stewarding transformation while we're here on earth. And I want to just challenge you to look at your life and to see, okay, how much am I consuming on a daily basis? Would I do better to turn my phone off and put it in a little box? You can actually buy a phone lock box that has a timer on it on Amazon, or you can get like an app that shuts your phone down for a certain amount of time and gives you coupon points for it. But like, should I shut my phone down and focus on each task that's at hand every single day without distraction? You wouldn't believe how much time I've saved by not looking at my phone anymore and only having about 2 or 3 timestamps during the day where I check my phone, see my messages, if anybody calls, check any messages I may have on the socials, and then put it away. Like, do it for 5 minutes and put it away because I run my business from my phone and a lot of my socials. It's kind of a mandatory thing I have to do. But if I didn't own a business and I didn't have to be on social media, I would take a full 100% break from social media for at least 30 days and reprioritize some things in your life. And when you're doing dishes, when you are walking, when you're vacuuming, when you're literally sliding a cloth across your kitchen and cleaning your kitchen counters, I want you to just be so present in that moment and be present with your thoughts and not be listening to a podcast, not be listening to something in the background, not be checking your phone in the other hand, but actually be present for 2 seconds and see where that takes you and trial it for literally a week or two and just see how it feels, how much better it feels to actually be present and actually be calm. Because if you get nothing from this podcast episode, just know that I truly think that our overconsumption of media, material things, and just in anything we can get our hands on in general, like that loss of solitude has ruined a lot of things for us. It's ruined our intuition, our ability to be creative and to think deeply. But now it's starting to affect our bodies. Like, of course, I know a counselor, a pediatric counselor in town who's like, you wouldn't imagine every client I get is somebody who's been bullied on Snapchat or social media. Or, you know, there are tons of people who feel drained all the time and they don't know why, and they don't think they have any time on their hands, when in reality there's just junk taking up time. And I think it's important to take a look at, to self-reflect on, because if we're constantly being drained all the time of our energy, our F's, excuse my language, the F's that we give, if we're being drained of all of that all of the time, and even our minerals on a molecular cellular level, if even those are being drained, that's not good. That's not going to take us anywhere great with our health. Minerals are like the spark plugs in your body. Think of minerals like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. Your big four minerals is what those are. The most abundant minerals in your body. Think of those as spark plugs that literally give electricity to your body and help make the machine actually work. It's like if you plug in your Instant Pot, and magically, because you plugged in your Instant Pot, because you have minerals, you use the plug-in, your Instant Pot works. Think of minerals as the oil that is oiling a machine and making it work better, work faster, work more efficiently, not creak anymore. That's what minerals do for you. And when you're constantly depleting it and depleting your spirit and just having a drained sense of self, a drained spirit, because you're being a glutton of information, then that's not going to affect your health in a good way. It could cause hypothyroidism. It could cause your immune system to crash. It could cause you to not produce as many digestive juices. It causes you to not be able to get nutrients and hormones into the cells where they belong. It's pretty freaking detrimental. If you found this at all helpful, I do want to invite you right now to sign up for my email list. When you sign up for my email list every Friday, you're going to get a rundown of what we talked about in this week's episode, along with extra resources, links, studies, book links, whatever, if you want more information on this subject matter. This is one of the most foundational things I think any woman could do for herself, is really keep tabs on her spirit, and join the email list if you would like to get more information about this, but keep listening for further episodes, because we will build upon this. We will build on the information, the groundwork that I'm setting right now. And if you love this podcast, please give it 5 stars, rate and review it, leave a nice comment if you will. That would be really nice. If we could connect all of this, I would say that women are meant to be intuitive. We're meant to be really in touch with our own bodies, with our own spirit, with our own intuition, and to have a clear mind in order to be truly wise and to serve the people in our lives really well. And there are so many things distracting us and jumbling up our brains, like overconsumption and kind of, being a glutton of information. And we can't let that take hold and take control of our lives and our minds, because when we constantly are synthesizing information and using up energy, physical energy, to even think or consume things, because that's how it works. Our bodies use physical energy to consume things on our phone, to consume things in a book, to consume whatever. And we're never resting, and we're never replenishing by resting. Our bodies will be drained and our bodies will not work as well. And not only that, but people tend to become anxious when they are depleted. People tend to become very anxious, very worrisome, and lose a bit of rationalization when their energy is completely spent. And I don't want that to be you. I don't want that to be me. And I think that if we are never doing anything for ourselves that's going to replenish us, if we're never in solitude, if we're never being quiet and creative, and we're always in a state of consuming, then eating, then distracting, we're not serving ourselves well, and we're not stewarding our bodies well, because our bodies feel everything. And I don't want us to lower our vibrational frequency to where we're just kind of a slug of a person and we don't have the energy or the high spirits to do any of the extra life-giving things in our lives, like throwing a party for a friend, or we might not feel like we have the capacity to go on that fun trip, or we might not feel like we have the capacity to take on that Bible study or a leadership position, because we have put so much in our minds that we feel overwhelmed. And it might look like on the outside that you're really not doing that much, but when you really sit down and maybe put pen to paper and break down what all you consume each day and what makes you anxious, and how being on social media or constantly buying things, or maybe taking on the burdens of others way too much, is just draining the life out of you, you'll probably be able to see some patterns with your health as well. So, I hope that this was helpful. I hope it was insightful. I will see you for the next episode. Not sure what the next episode will be about. Sign up for my email list, and I'll talk to you soon. Stay healthy.